Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. In a landmark decision that will echo for generations, the Supreme Court struck down President Trump's sweeping tariffs, sending shockwaves through the highest levels of government and industry alike. The ruling was not just a legal technicality, it was a bold statement about the limits of presidential power and the enduring strength of the Constitution. With a decisive majority, the justices delivered a sharp rebuke to executive overreach, making it clear that no president, regardless of party or popularity, is above the foundational checks and balances that define American democracy. Outside the courthouse, protesters and supporters alike gathered, their voices reflecting the deep divisions and high stakes of the moment. This historic ruling brings an end to a tumultuous era of economic protectionism, signaling a return to a more stable, rules-based system of international commerce. For years, businesses and trading partners around the world have navigated uncertainty, watching as tariffs reshaped global supply chains and rattled markets. Now, with the court's decision, there is hope for renewed confidence and predictability in the global economy. In their written opinion, the justices reaffirmed that the power to tax and regulate trade belongs to Congress, not the White House. This fundamental principle, rooted in the Constitution, ensures that no single branch can unilaterally reshape the nation's economic destiny. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill now face the challenge and the opportunity of reasserting their authority over trade policy. The tariffs, enacted under the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, were justified as a response to persistent trade deficits and alleged threats to national security. But critics, including economists and lawmakers from both parties, called this a dangerous pretext for a sweeping power grab by the executive branch. The debate over these tariffs has raged for years, dividing communities and industries across the country. Now, the Treasury faces the daunting and unprecedented task of refunding billions in collected tariffs. For business owners, this means the possibility of long-awaited relief from punishing costs that have squeezed profit margins and forced difficult decisions. For families, it could mean lower prices at the grocery store and on everyday goods, easing the burden of inflation that has touched every corner of American life. This is more than a legal story. It's a turning point for American democracy and the balance of power. The decision reaffirms the importance of separation of powers, reminding the nation that the rule of law, not the rule of one, is what truly defines the United States. It's a moment that will shape the relationship between Congress, the President, and the people for years to come. As the sun rises over Washington, the nation stands at a critical juncture. The future of executive authority, the role of Congress, and the direction of global trade all hang in the balance. The Supreme Court's decision is not just a verdict on tariffs, it's a defining moment in the ongoing story of American governance and the enduring struggle to balance power, liberty, and prosperity. The roots of this pivotal decision trace back to the Trump administration's controversial use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or APA, a law originally designed to give the president broad authority to respond to extraordinary threats to the nation's security, particularly those originating from abroad. In a move that surprised many, the administration declared that persistent trade deficits, essentially the gap between what the U.S. imports and exports, constituted a national emergency. This interpretation of the law allowed the president to bypass Congress entirely and unilaterally impose sweeping tariffs on foreign goods, marking a dramatic departure from decades of established trade policy that relied on negotiation and legislative oversight. Critics from both sides of the aisle quickly sounded the alarm, warning that this set a dangerous precedent for unchecked executive power. They argued that trade deficits, while economically significant, do not rise to the level of a true national emergency, as envisioned by the drafters of IEEPA. The Trump administration, however, insisted that these tariffs were necessary to protect American industries and jobs, especially in manufacturing sectors that had been struggling for years against foreign competition. Yet, for many American businesses, the new tariffs meant higher costs for imported materials and components, making it harder to compete both at home and abroad. Some companies were forced to raise prices, lay off workers, or even shut down operations. Retaliatory tariffs from other countries soon followed, hitting American exporters hard, especially farmers, who found their products facing new barriers in key international markets. The legal and political battle over the scope of presidential powers under IEPA quickly escalated, setting the stage for a high-stakes Supreme Court showdown that would test the limits of executive authority. At its core, the case raised a fundamental question: just how far can a president go in the name of national security, and who gets to decide what truly constitutes an emergency? The answer could reshape the balance of power in American government for years to come. The legal fight over the president's sweeping use of emergency powers soon escalated all the way to the Supreme Court, drawing national attention and sparking heated debate across the country. The case was seen as a pivotal moment, with the potential to reshape the boundaries of executive authority for years to come. Challengers included a diverse coalition: small business owners worried about their livelihoods, states concerned about federal overreach, and civil liberties groups alarmed by the precedent such powers could set. The Trump administration, meanwhile, mounted a vigorous defense. They insisted that the president must have broad, flexible authority to act decisively in matters of foreign affairs and economic emergencies, especially when national security or the economy was at stake. Their legal team argued that courts should not second-guess a president's declaration of a national emergency, warning that judicial interference could undermine the executive branch's ability to respond swiftly to threats. Opponents, led by prominent attorney Neil Katyal, countered forcefully. They argued that trade deficits, while important, do not constitute true emergencies under the law, and that the administration was stretching the definition of emergency far beyond its intended limits. They also accused the administration of sidestepping Congress's exclusive power to tax and regulate trade, warning that allowing such actions would erode the constitutional balance of power. Nearly 50 of the nation's top economists weighed in, filing a detailed brief with the court. They warned that imposing tariffs would likely harm the U.S. economy, increase costs for consumers and businesses, and fail to address the underlying causes of trade deficits. As the justices prepared to hear arguments, President Trump launched a high-profile public campaign. He warned supporters and the media that a ruling against him would spell economic disaster, framing the case as a test of his ability to protect American jobs and industries. Many legal experts saw this as an attempt to pressure the justices, urging them to consider the political and economic consequences of their decision, rather than focusing solely on the law and the Constitution. The stakes could not have been higher. At the heart of the case was a fundamental question: where do the limits of presidential power truly lie, and who gets to decide? On October 26, 2025, the Supreme Court issued a 6-3 ruling striking down the tariffs imposed under IEPA. The majority found that President Trump exceeded his authority. Trade deficits are not the unusual and extraordinary threat IEPA was meant to address. The court warned that allowing such use of emergency powers would undermine Congress's constitutional role over commerce and taxation. The decision was hailed as a victory for the rule of law and a crucial check on executive power. Dissenting justices argued for more deference to the president in national security matters. The ruling only affects tariffs imposed under IEPA, not those under other statutes. Still, the legal principles set here will shape future challenges to executive action. The Supreme Court's decision triggered an economic aftershock, forcing the Treasury to refund nearly $90 billion in tariffs. This massive process will take years and strain government resources. Financial markets reacted swiftly. Stocks for import-heavy companies surged while the dollar fluctuated. For businesses, especially small ones, the ruling offers relief and a chance to recover from years of higher costs. However, the scars remain. Many companies made costly supply chain changes and lost opportunities. The refunds help, but can't undo years of uncertainty and disruption. The economic landscape has shifted, and businesses must now adapt again. The end of the tariff era brings both relief and new challenges. The human cost of the tariff era was felt by workers and families nationwide. Industries relying on imports faced soaring costs, leading to layoffs and stalled investments. Small businesses, lacking resources to absorb price hikes, struggled to survive. For consumers, tariffs acted as a hidden tax, raising prices on everyday goods and straining household budgets. The burden fell hardest on low and middle-income families. The Supreme Court's decision promises relief, with lower prices expected as tariffs disappear. This case shows how trade policy directly impacts American lives. The Supreme Court's ruling recalibrates the balance of power between the presidency and Congress. By rejecting the administration's broad use of EPA, the court reaffirmed that taxing and spending authority belongs to Congress. Future presidents will face more scrutiny, if they try to use emergency powers for domestic policy. The decision may prompt Congress to reclaim some of its constitutional authority and reform emergency statutes. Internationally, the ruling could help restore America's credibility and repair strained alliances. This case forces a national dialogue about the limits of executive power in a democracy. It's a landmark moment for the separation of powers. Economists and legal scholars widely praise the Supreme Court's decision as a win for economic logic and constitutional principle. Nearly 50 top economists argued that tariffs wouldn't fix trade deficits and would harm the economy, a view now vindicated. Maury Obstfeld and others said removing tariffs will lower prices and boost efficiency. Legal experts hailed the ruling as a crucial check on executive power and a reaffirmation of the separation of powers. The decision sets a precedent, making it harder for future presidents to declare economic emergencies for political reasons. Some conservative scholars worry the court overstepped by second-guessing the executive on national security. The debate continues over how much discretion a president should have in emergencies. Still, the ruling is seen as a vital defense of constitutional checks and balances. The Supreme Court's decision ends a contentious chapter and opens the door to a new era for American trade and governance. The government now faces the complex task of refunding billions, while businesses and consumers adjust to a tariff-free market. The ruling removes a major source of instability and sets the stage for economic recovery. It's a landmark affirmation that Congress, not the president, controls taxation and trade. The decision promises relief for businesses and families, but unwinding the effects will take time. Politically, it forces a reckoning over the scope of presidential power. The path forward demands renewed commitment to open debate, legislative accountability, and a rules-based system. Today's ruling is not an end, but a beginning, a chance to rebuild a more stable, prosperous, and constitutionally sound future.